My name is Megan Thompson, and I was 34 years old the night my parents fired me from my own family by group message. It arrived at 7:42 on a Tuesday evening, 12 people on the thread, and it said, "We think it's best you step away for now." My Aunt Rhonda reacted with a thumbs up. That little cartoon hand sat under the words like a stamp on a form. I read it at my kitchen table until the screen went dark. Then I wrote back, "Understood. I'll respect that and step away from the family fun too." That night, I closed my contribution. At 2:15 in the morning, my phone started buzzing, and by sunrise there were 89 missed calls. My dad's voicemail was the only one I played. "What happened? The bank flagged everything." I sent back a single line, "I'm honoring your decision." But here's what none of them knew that night. The fund was the smallest thing I'd been carrying. It would take my family 1 month to find the rest, one piece at a time. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, the channel where quiet women finally say enough and family secrets meet daylight. If you've ever been the one holding everything up, this story is for you. Drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. I run a bookkeeping office on Front Street in Marietta, Ohio, 2 rooms above a hardware store, my assistant Kayla, and a coffee maker older than she is. Numbers are how I make my living, and honestly, how I make sense of people. A ledger never flatters anybody. It just tells you what happened, which is more than most families can say. I balance books for a living, and I know what a number looks like when it's lying. I grew up 12 minutes from that office, across the Muskingum Bridge, in a white house on Cherry Hill Road with a porch swing. My dad hung the summer I turned 9. Dad, Frank, spent 31 years as service manager at Callahan Ford Lincoln. He kept a pen in his shirt pocket and believed in oil changes and God, roughly in that order. My mom, Carol, ran the women's ministry at First Baptist, and she ran our family's reputation the way generals run wars, with maps nobody else was allowed to see. My brother Danny is 3 years older than me. He fixes furnaces, married Jess, has 2 kids, a good heart, and no head for paperwork. Then there's Aunt Rhonda, my mother's younger sister, who has agreed with whoever spoke last since roughly 1975. From the street, we looked solid. Sunday dinners, matching Easter photos, a casserole on every grieving porch in the county. I believed in us the way you believe in a bridge you cross every day. You don't inspect it. You just trust that it holds. 6 years before that group message, a piece of county mail in a junk drawer showed me what my family actually ran on. I'd gone looking for batteries. I found the bill for everything instead. Father's Day, 2020. The dealership had closed that March. Corporate consolidation, they called it, which is a long word for 31 years fitting into one cardboard box. Dad was 57, too young for Social Security, too old for anyone to hire, and too proud to say either sentence out loud. At dinner, he carved the ham like nothing had a blade to it but him. After the pie, the TV remote died, and I went digging through the kitchen junk drawer for batteries, the same drawer that has held twine, dead pens, and loose screws since the Reagan administration. Under a seed catalog, I found an envelope from the Washington County Treasurer. It was open. It was also very red. Delinquent property taxes, $4,910, past due. I stood there with a pack of batteries in one hand and my childhood in the other. Through the window, I could see Dad out in the garage, wiping down a workbench that was already clean. I walked out there with the envelope, and he looked at it the way men look at diagnoses. The buyout on the pension came to almost nothing, he said quietly. Cents on the dollar. Lawyers got the rest. He was behind on the county, behind on the light bill, and a payment behind on a home equity line I hadn't known existed. Then he said the sentence that decided the next 6 years of my life. Your mother doesn't know the number. She can't. You know how she is about being seen. I asked him how bad it was going to get by spring. He picked up the rag again and wiped the same clean spot. That was the whole answer. And we both knew it. We built it in the garage that weekend, my dad and me, the way you build anything in a garage, quietly and out of sight of the kitchen. I opened a checking account in my name only and nicknamed it the Family Fund. Every month, on the first, $2,400 would move from it into my parents' account, time to land before the home equity payment, the light bill, and the insurance drafts. The property taxes I would pay straight to the county myself, twice a year, so no red envelope would ever sit in that drawer again. Dad had one condition, and he said it with his hand flat on the workbench like he was swearing on it. Your mother can never know how much, and nobody else can know at all. I was 28. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Here is the part that still amazes me, as a professional. The cover story wasn't mine, and it wasn't Dad's. It was my mother's. Within a month, Carol had announced a family fund to the whole clan, a cheerful little kitty for emergencies and holidays. Everybody pitch in what you can. Aunt Rhonda put in $25 at Christmas and felt wonderful about it. Danny threw in $50 when his tax refund hit. And whenever anyone in town wondered how Frank and Carol were doing since the dealership, my mother would smile and say, "Frank's retirement did well." She never asked me a single question about the account. Not one. In 6 years, the woman contributed casseroles and a slogan, and somehow she was the manager of the whole story. I did the math much too late. The person who puts in the least is sometimes the one who decides what the money means. 72 firsts of the month. That's what 6 years comes to, if you're the kind of person who counts. And I am. $2,400 every month, quiet as a heartbeat. When their furnace died in 2022, the fund bought a new one. $6,100, installed by my brother's company at cost, billed to a warranty Danny never looked at twice. When the roof started letting rain into the attic, I covered half, $4,800, and Dad told everyone he'd been saving for it. The fund refilled Mom's arthritis prescriptions. It kept the truck insured. It floated Danny's tool loan the winter his van broke, though he thanked Mom and Dad for that one, and they let him. Meanwhile, I drove a 12-year-old Civic and kept renting the little apartment above my office, telling myself a house could wait one more year, then one more after that. I want to be clear, because it matters later. I wasn't a fool about it. In year 2, I sat my dad down and pushed to bring it into the open. Tell Danny, split the load, make it a real family plan. He wouldn't move. His mother had raised him on a vow after some old trouble I only half knew, something about charity and shame, and he told me flat, "If you make this public, I'll go to a bank before I embarrass your mother." I'd seen the kind of banks that wanted him, 14%, smiling, so I chose the smaller price and kept writing the quiet checks. It held like that for 6 years, my invisible arithmetic under everybody's feet. Then my brother decided to expand. Father's Day, June 21st, this past summer. Burgers in the backyard on Cherry Hill Road, Dad at the grill in the apron we'd given him a decade ago, Mom orbiting the picnic table with lemonade and stage direction. Danny stood up somewhere between the potato salad and the cake and announced he was opening a second shop out toward Belpre. Jess squeezed his arm. The kids cheered because he did. And then my mother, glowing like a woman revealing a prize, said, "And your father and I are lending him $25,000 to get it started. From savings." From savings. I sat very still with a paper plate on my knee. I knew, to the dollar, what my parents had in savings, because I was their savings. That $25,000 did not exist. Or rather, it existed in the future. In 72 more firsts of the month that hadn't happened yet. In my Civic staying alive another 5 years. In the house I would keep not buying. Nobody had asked me. They had promised my money to my brother in front of the whole family, as their own. I waited until the cake was cut. Then I said, as evenly as I know how, "Can we talk about the loan before anything's promised? Just the 4 of us, before it's set." That's all. You'd have thought I'd flipped the picnic table. Jess studied her fork. Danny's ears went red. And my mother's smile stayed exactly where it was while everything behind it moved, like a house where only the porch light is still on. "Not at the table, Megan," she said, sweet as the lemonade. "This is a celebration." Dad looked at the grill. The grill had nothing to add. 9 days of silence started that night, though I didn't know the count yet. The family thread went quiet the way a pond freezes, from the edges in. Jess still sent a photo of the kids at the pool. Nobody replied under mine. Wednesday, Danny texted me directly. No greeting. Why do you always have to run the numbers on people? I stared at that a long while. Running the numbers is the one thing I have ever done for this family, and it was somehow also my crime. I didn't apologize, because I hadn't done anything that needed one, and I've learned the hard way that apologizing for the truth just teaches people the truth is negotiable. Instead, I did what I do. I built a plan. 2 pages, plain language, no blame in it. Where things stood, what was sustainable, what wasn't, and 3 ways forward we could pick from together like adults. I figured I'd ask my parents for an hour some Sunday, lay it out, and finally drag the whole quiet arrangement into the air where it could breathe. I never got the chance to schedule it. What I got instead was Aunt Rhonda's voice in the background of my mother's kitchen every evening that week. I know because Rhonda mentioned it later, the way she mentions things. Sideways, and too late. 2 sisters and a speakerphone, deciding what I was. On the 9th day, a Tuesday, I closed the office at 6, made dinner for 1, and was rinsing the pan when the phone lit up on the counter. 7:42 p.m., the family thread. My mother's phrasing, my father's silence, and every relative I had, reading along. We've been talking as a family, and we think it's best you step away for now. We love you, but there's been a lot of tension since Father's Day, and everyone needs space to heal. We hope you'll respect that. Sent by my dad's phone, written in my mother's voice. I'd know that syrup anywhere. 12 people on the thread. My parents, Danny and Jess, Aunt Rhonda and Uncle Gary. 2 cousins, their spouses, my grandmother's old landline that nobody ever removed, and me. Step away. From my own family on the same thread we used for birthday cakes and snow warnings. I watched it sit there. Then Aunt Rhonda reacted with a thumbs up, and I heard myself laugh. One short sound, alone in my kitchen. A thumbs up? That woman taught my Sunday school class. She'd known me since the hospital. I put the phone down, washed the pan, dried my hands, and picked it back up. My reply took me 1 draft. Understood. I'll respect that, and step away from the family fun too. No period of negotiation, no paragraph of hurt. If the family had voted me out, the family could not keep the part of me that paid its bills. That math has to work in both directions, or it was never a family fund at all. It was 11 o'clock when I opened the laptop. The July transfer was scheduled to run at midnight, $2,400, the 73rd first of the month. I canceled it. I canceled the county e-check for the July tax installment. I canceled the little autopay that fed Mom's pharmacy card. Each click was a year of my life, and the strangest part is how calm my hands were. Then I turned off the ringer and went to bed. At 2:14 in the morning, every machine my family never knew existed tried to speak at once. Here's what happens at 2 in the morning when the ground quietly stops being there. Banks run their overnight batches in the small hours. Payments post, transfers land. Machines talk to machines while the whole county sleeps. That night, the machines had bad news for each other. My transfer never arrived, so my parents' checking account sat close to empty when the drafts came calling. The home equity payment, $512, reached in and found lint. The electric bill bounced behind it. The insurance draft bounced behind that. And every single failure fired off a text alert to the phone on my father's nightstand, because years ago I was the one who'd set up his alerts, being the kind of daughter who thinks of things. Insufficient funds. Payment could not be processed. Action required. Ping, ping, ping. At 2:14 in the morning, in a dark bedroom on Cherry Hill Road, where 2 people had gone to sleep, believing the ground was just the ground and not their daughter, holding still so nobody would feel her breathing. At 2:15, my phone started buzzing on the dresser. I know the exact minute because I looked. One eye, screen glare, Dad, decline. It buzzed again before it finished going dark. I lay there listening to it rattle against the wood, and I want to be honest with you about what I felt. Because it wasn't triumph. It was the feeling you get when you finally set down something heavy and your arms float up on their own, light and a little sick, like your body no longer knows its own weight. I turned the phone face down. The buzzing kept time all night, patient as rain on a roof. By morning, it had a number. 89 missed calls by sunrise, 41 from Dad, 26 from Mom, 15 from Danny, whose bedtime is 9:30, 7 from Aunt Rhonda, thumbs up Rhonda, calling me at 4 in the morning like we were close. There were texts too, a column of panic in all caps, but only one voicemail. My father's voice, and I have never heard it like that, not even the day the dealership closed. Megan, call me back. What happened? The bank flagged everything. The house payment, the lights, all of it. There's alerts all over my phone. Your mother's... Just call. Please. I sat on the edge of my bed in the gray light and played it 3 times. Not to enjoy it. To make sure of something, and I was right. In 90 seconds of terror, the question was what happened, not what did we do. The bank had flagged everything, like weather, like an act of God, like the money that had appeared under them every month for 6 years was a natural feature of the earth that had inexplicably stopped. My thumb hovered. There was a version of me, the version they were all counting on, frankly, who would have fixed it by breakfast and apologized for the inconvenience. I typed one line instead. I'm honoring your decision. Then I put the phone on silent, showered, and opened my office at 8 sharp, because women like me always open at 8 sharp. Kayla took one look at my face and made the coffee strong. If you've ever been the one everybody leans on and nobody sees, tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And make sure you're subscribed, because what my mother did with the truth over the next few weeks, I still don't have a polite word for. The knock on my door came the very next morning, and it wasn't her. Of course it wasn't her. 7:40 in the morning, and my father stood at the street door of my building with his cap in both hands, working the brim like a rosary. 63 years old, pressed shirt, shaved. A man dressing up to go ask his daughter something he'd rather die than say. Your mother doesn't know I'm here, he said, which in our family is practically a love language. I made him coffee upstairs at my little kitchen table, and he looked around the apartment like he was seeing it new. The second-hand couch, the folding bookshelf, the window unit humming. The daughter with $180,000 out the door lived like a grad student, and I watched some arithmetic happen behind his eyes that had never happened before. He couldn't ask. He got as far as we twice, and the payment once, and each time the sentence died of shame on the table between us. So I helped him, because 34 years of loving somebody doesn't shut off in one night, and said, I know exactly what's due, Dad. I'm not doing this to watch you drown. I slid a single sheet of paper across, every bill that used to ride on my back, each with its amount and its date, in plain print. Not a ledger, a handoff. These are yours now. You have more time than the alerts make it feel like. Late is survivable. Pretending is what's expensive. He read it top to bottom twice, folded it in quarters, and put it in his shirt pocket behind the pen, right where he's kept everything important since 1985. At the door he stopped, back still to me. She told everyone you'd gone through some kind of episode, he said. And then he went down the stairs, and I found out where my mother had gone instead of calling me. She'd gone to church. Thursday, the pharmacy called my office. That's how these things reach you in a town like Marietta, not with a summons, just Darlene from the drive-through window. Apologetic. My mother's arthritis refill was declined, the card on file wasn't working, and Carol had stood at the counter saying there must be some mistake until the line behind her grew opinions. My mother has hands that ache in June. I know because I've watched her knead biscuit dough slower every year, and I'd bought those pills quietly for 6 years, tucked inside the same autopay as everything else. Here is where I want to be exact, because it matters to me that you understand what I was doing and what I wasn't. The fund was closed. The fund stayed closed. But I drove over on my lunch break, paid for the refill at the counter in person, and set the account so that one prescription, that one, billed straight to me from then on. No card of hers involved, no fund resurrected. Darlene didn't ask questions. Darlene has a mother too. My assistant Kayla asked when I got back why I'd pay for anything after what they did, and I gave her the only answer I had. The fund was a lie I'm done telling. Her joints aren't a lesson. Boundaries, it turns out, need a steady hand, and mine were 3 days old and wobbly. But that line felt straight, so I drew it. Driving back down Route 60, I passed First Baptist. Thursday evening, and the parking lot was full. I remember thinking some committee must be meeting. Some committee was. By Sunday, I had become a prayer request. Not by name at the pulpit. My mother is an artist, not a vandal. It moved the way she moves, through the women's ministry phone tree in tones of loving concern. Megan is going through something. She's cut the whole family off. Pray for Carol, she's holding up so well. And just like that, the pity started flowing in the correct direction, toward my mother, carried on casseroles. Mrs. Pruitt brought scalloped potatoes to Cherry Hill Road. The Hendersons had my parents to supper. Somebody's husband offered to look at Frank's gutters, since apparently the poor man's ungrateful daughter had abandoned them in their golden years. Aunt Rhonda left me a voicemail that belongs in a museum of voicemails. 2 minutes of scripture-adjacent disappointment, ending with, "I just never thought you'd let money change you, sweetheart." Let money change me. I sat in my car and laughed until it wasn't laughter anymore. 2 of my cousins quietly unfollowed me. The thread, of course, stayed silent. I was still on it, technically, the way a name stays on a mailbox after the person's moved out. I did nothing. I want that on the record. No counterstory, no corrective texts, no receipts posted anywhere. Partly it was strategy, because you cannot out-narrate a woman who has run the story of a town for 40 years on her home field. But mostly it was older and simpler than strategy. Even now, even exiled, I was still keeping their secret. Still holding the roof up with my mouth shut. Monday at 5, Danny's truck pulled up outside my office and he didn't come upstairs happy. My brother filled my office doorway the way he's filled doorways since high school, arms crossed, jaw first. "Mom says you froze the family's money," he said. "The fund. Everybody's fund. Because your feelings got hurt at the cookout." I let that sit a second. Kayla found something urgent to file in the back room. "Everybody's fund," I repeated. "Danny, one question and then I'll answer anything you want. In 6 years, how much have you put in it?" His mouth opened on a number he didn't have. I watched him hunt for it. The Christmas 50? Maybe the year of the tax refund? Watched him do more math in 10 seconds than he'd done in 6 years, and watched the math come back small and cold. "That's not the point," he said, but quieter, because he builds things for a living and he could hear a joist creak somewhere in the story he'd been handed. "It's exactly the point," I said. "I didn't freeze everybody's money. I stopped giving mine. Those are different sentences." He stood there working it. And then my brother said something that told me the ground under Cherry Hill Road had never been as solid as either of us pretended. "Dad's been weird about money since the dealership closed. Cash for everything. Wouldn't let me quote him for a new furnace back in 22. Then suddenly the warranty covered it." He looked at me. I looked at him. Warranties don't cover acts of daughter. "Danny," I said gently, "go ask your parents. Not me. It was never mine to tell, and it still isn't." He left without slamming the door, which for Danny is a white flag. That Sunday, I drove to Cherry Hill Road at 10:30, when I knew the pews would be holding them. I hadn't planned a speech, because there was nobody to hear one. On my keyring, between the office key and the civics, hung the brass one, the key to my parents' house, cut for me at 16, carried for 18 years, through every apartment, every purse. If I was to step away, then the door I could always walk through wasn't mine anymore, and I wasn't going to hold a lie in metal. I put it in a plain envelope, no note, and taped it to the inside of the storm door, where the screen would keep the weather off. Then I stood on that porch a minute, in the quiet. The grass was 2 weeks long. Dad mows on Saturdays always, and hadn't. The porch swing chains had rust blooming through, and the truck was gone. Not at church. Gone. The F-150 my father had babied for 20 years wasn't in the driveway or the garage, and the oil stain on the concrete was already fading, the way it does when nothing new drips on it. Through the kitchen window I could see the wall calendar by the phone, the one Mom's had since before cell phones, and what I saw there followed me home and has never really left. Every first of the month, June, July, August, all of them, was circled. Red pen, her handwriting. My mother, who never asked one question about the fund, who managed the story and touched none of the math, had been circling the day my money landed for 6 years, the way you circle a birthday. She knew the rhythm of me by heart. She just never said my name over it. The 1st of August was a Saturday, and this time no phones rang about it. The first quiet first of the month in 6 years, and I woke at 6 anyway. Made coffee. Sat at the table with my phone dark in front of me like a switched-off appliance, feeling for a chore that wasn't there. If you've never had a burden long enough to miss it, I'm glad, and I hope you never learn how much a missing weight can weigh. My hands genuinely didn't know what to do on a first of the month, so I drove. No plan. Windows down. Out past Divola. And on Putnam Street I slowed for a little brick house with a deep front porch and a for sale sign leaning slightly, like it was tired of asking. I sat across the street from that house for half an hour. 34 years old? I could afford it. Had been able to afford it for years is the joke. The down payment had simply gone out $2,400 at a time, buying a story I wasn't even a character in. And parked there, I finally asked myself the question I'd been outrunning since the garage in 2020. Who was I, if nobody needed me? Because I knew how to be the responsible one, the quiet fix, the ground. I had no idea how to just be somebody's daughter or somebody's neighbor or a woman on a porch with her own name on the deed. The question scared me more than the 89 calls had. I drove home without writing down the realtor's number. Baby steps. That evening, Aunt Rhonda called, and I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me noticed the hour was polite and picked up. Her voice was different, smaller. "Megan," she said. "What exactly was the family fund?" Here's how the truth started leaking, and I promise you I didn't spring the leak. With my parents visibly struggling, the gutters, the grass, the prayer chain working overtime, one of my cousins had floated the obvious idea. Why not help Frank and Carol out of the family fund? The kitty. The rainy day jar we all owned together. So Aunt Rhonda, who as it turns out was listed on that cheerful little cover account Mom had opened for appearances, went to the branch and asked for a balance and a history. 6 years of the whole clan's generosity, minus my transfers, which had never touched it. $1,300 and change, birthday 20s, Christmas 50s, one ambitious 100 from Uncle Gary in 2023 that he'd mentioned at least yearly since. Rhonda stood in the bank lobby looking at the number that the entire family believed was a safety net, and the number looked back, and neither of them blinked. "But then what's been paying?" She started to ask me on the phone, and stopped. Because 60 years in this family had taught her exactly what fills a gap that size and says nothing. Me. The thumbs up she'd tapped so breezily was sitting in her lap now, heavy. To her credit, and I'm stingy with credit for Rhonda, she said sorry, like she meant it. But my mother was already ahead of us both. Because that same week, the story changed again. Version 2 came through Jess, who heard it at a church picnic and called me, bewildered. Carol was now explaining that I had been controlling my parents' accounts for years, poor Frank barely allowed to buy coffee, and that the family had finally, bravely, asked me to step back. My exile, rewritten as an intervention, and that version was headed straight for my clients. Understand what I do for a living. I hold the books for 24 small businesses in a town where reputation is the only currency that never inflates. A bookkeeper who controls her own parents' money is not a bookkeeper for long. It took 11 days. Mr. Ellery, who owns the tire shop and has been my client since I opened, came in not quite meeting my eyes and asked for his files back. No offense, Megan, it's just, there's talk. And my wife's in the Bible study and I had his records boxed, indexed, and transferred to the new accountant within 24 hours, with a checklist so clean it was almost rude, because the best answer to it's just, talk is work nobody can talk about. Then I sat in my office after close with the lights off and let myself be, for about 10 minutes, as angry as I actually was. I had stopped paying, and that was allowed. She was now spending my name to cover the difference, the one asset of mine she could still reach. That night, my phone buzzed once, a voicemail from Dad, and his voice had gravel in it that hadn't been there at my kitchen table. The truck's gone, Meg. Sold it Tuesday to a fella in Parkersburg. Caught up the electric and the insurance with it. Don't tell your mother I told you. She's saying we're storing it for winter. 20 years he'd kept that F-150 alive. I sat with the phone against my ear long after the message ended. Then came one more text, the longest I'd ever seen my father type. Meet me at the diner on Route 60 tomorrow. I'll buy the coffee. There's something you need to see before your mother signs anything. Before we go on, if this story's got its hooks in you, take 1 second and hit subscribe. Because this next part is where I stopped asking what my family had done to me and started deciding what kind of daughter I was going to be. I'd like to know what you would have done. The diner on Route 60 has vinyl booths the color of root beer and a waitress named Sue who calls everybody Han. Dad was in the back booth with his cap off, and he didn't start with the thing in the manila folder beside him. He started with 1978. You know your mother grew up on a farm, he said. I knew the postcard version. The farm out toward Beverly. Sold before I was born. It wasn't sold, Dad said. It was lost. Auctioned off the courthouse steps when your mother was 13. Bad loans and a worse harvest. Her daddy stood in the crowd and watched his own hayrake get numbers painted on it. The church had rallied, he said, the way churches do. Groceries on the porch. A collection envelope with the family's name on it, read aloud. And coats. Donated coats for the kids. Good warm ones from families with more. And in the collar of the one Carol got, in careful marker, somebody else's daughter's name. She wore that coat for 2 winters, Dad said. Whole school knowing whose it was. And at her wedding, her daddy, a man who never said much, like somebody else you know, told her, don't you ever let this family be the ones being prayed for again. I sat with my coffee going cold. 40 years I'd known this woman, and nobody had ever handed me the key to her. It didn't excuse a single casserole of what she was doing to me, but it explained the engine. My mother wasn't lying to hurt me. She'd been lying so long it was load-bearing. Take it out and her whole sky comes down. I'm telling you this, Dad said, so you know what I'm up against when I say she'd rather drown than wave. Then he slid the folder across the table, and the past stopped mattering quite so much, because the folder was about the future. A flyer, cheerful yellow, senior homeowner relief in letters like a carnival. And under it, an application in my mother's neat church bulletin handwriting, filled out down to the last line, but to the signatures. I read that application the way a surgeon reads an X-ray, 13.9% interest. An origination fee dressed up as a processing courtesy. Monthly payments that looked almost gentle for 2 years and then climbed like a fever, and the whole thing staked against the house, the paid-off house, the one asset my parents actually owned in the world. It was the kind of loan that exists because proud people would rather sign with strangers in the dark than say one true sentence to their own family in the light. She hears things are catching up with us, Dad said. This way nobody knows. Not even you. I put my palm flat on the paper like I could hold it down. Dad, this isn't a rope. It's an anchor painted like a rope. I know what it is, he said, and his voice cracked in the middle, first time in my whole life. You think I don't know? But I can't give her the other thing. The other thing is everybody knowing. There it was. The family religion. 1 sentence long. I looked out at the parking lot and did the only honest math available. I could write a check tonight, quietly, and be the ground again, and we would all sink back into the same warm lie and drown in it on a schedule. Or I could stay out, clean and principled, and watch my mother sign that thing inside a month. I'm not writing checks in the dark anymore, I said. Not ever again. That's done. He nodded slowly, like a man at a graveside. Then she'll sign it in the dark instead. No, I said. There's a third way, but it costs. I need everyone in one kitchen, and first I need a week. If you don't know what a HUD housing counselor is, write it down somewhere, because someday somebody you love will need one, and the meeting is free. Ms. Alvarez worked out of a shared office near the courthouse, had reading glasses on a beaded chain, and treated my parents' finances, which I laid out from memory, every number, like a plumbing problem. Unglamorous, fixable, no sermon included. In 1 hour, I learned more useful things than the yellow flyer wanted anyone to know. The county would put the missed tax installment on a payment plan. Penalties stop growing the day you set it up. The bank holding the home equity line would sooner restructure than chase a 63-year-old into default, because paperwork is cheaper than lawyers. There was an owner occupancy credit on the taxes that Dad had never once filed for, small but real. And then she took her glasses off and said the grown-up thing, the one I'd been circling for weeks without landing. Ms. Thompson, the simplest fix is also the hardest one for families. That's a lot of house for 2 people on a fixed income. A house is not a family, it's a bill with memories. I drove home the long way, past Putnam Street, and that night I built the whole thing on a single sheet of paper. What I'd pay to zero out the damage, what I'd contribute monthly, with a number and an end date, not a vein. What Danny could carry, what Rhonda could do that wasn't money, what Mom and Dad would have to do in return. 1 meeting, 1 signature, 1 spring. Every line of it survivable, every line of it out loud. It could work, I thought. There was exactly 1 person on Earth guaranteed to fight it like death itself. I sent it to the family thread. The same thread. I want that understood. The one with the birthday cakes and the snow warnings and the message that had voted me off the island at 7:42 on a Tuesday. 6 weeks of my silence sat above it like snowpack. And then, Sunday, 4 p.m., Mom and Dad's kitchen, about the family fund. I'll answer every question anyone has ever had. Everyone should come. I put the phone down and made dinner, and I'd be lying if I said my hands were as calm as the message was. The replies landed in order of character. Danny. I'll be there. Jess. A heart. Uncle Gary. What fund, Lowell? God bless Uncle Gary, the only honest man in 3 counties. My mother replied privately. 1 line, no greeting. There is nothing to discuss. I didn't answer her because there was nothing to discuss. And then, on the main thread, under my announcement, where 12 people could see it and remember everything, Aunt Rhonda reacted with a thumbs up. I stared at that ridiculous little hand and felt something twist in my chest that was half laugh and half forgiveness arriving early. Same emoji, different army. Saturday night, around 9, someone knocked on my apartment door, and I remember thinking Danny had forgotten how doorbells work. It wasn't Danny. My mother stood on my landing in her good blue cardigan, hair done, spine straight, purse held in front of her with both hands like a shield. And I realized, as we looked at each other through the screen, that in the 4 years I had lived above my office, Carol Thompson had never once been inside her daughter's home. "May I come in?" she said. It was not a question. I opened the door anyway. She sat on the edge of my second-hand couch the way you sit in a doctor's office, and her eyes did one slow lap of the apartment. The folding bookshelf, the window unit, the 12-year-old car keys in the bowl, and I watched her file it all somewhere she'd never have to look at it again. She declined tea. Then my mother, who had not spoken to me in 6 weeks, made me the best offer she had ever made anybody. "Come home, Megan. Sunday dinners. Your chair. All of it. Like before." A breath. "We'll tell people it was a mix-up with the bank. These things happen. Nobody understands computers. The fun goes back the way it was, and there's no need for this meeting. There it was. Everything I wanted, gift wrapped in everything that was killing me. And because she is not a stupid woman, my mother did not stop there. She leaned in, and her voice went soft the way it did when I was small and sick, and she took the knife she knows best. Sweetheart, you were happiest when you were helping. That's who you are. It's who you've always been. Why do you need them to see it? I want to tell you I felt nothing. I felt everything. That sentence had been running my life since a garage in 2020, and she'd just said it out loud like a compliment. The meeting happens, Mom. Her chin came up. The softness folded itself away like linen. It's what's best, she said, standing, smoothing her skirt. It's always been what's best. That's all I have ever done for this family. What's best. She was at the door when I said it, quietly, to her back. Best for who? My mother stopped for exactly one heartbeat. Then she let herself out, and her footsteps on my stairs were perfectly even, all the way down. And God help me, some tired part of me sat there on that couch and wanted to take the deal. I didn't sleep much that night, and for once I let myself look straight at the reason. Because she wasn't entirely wrong. That's the thing about my mother. She never is. I had been happiest when I was helping. And around 2 a.m. at my kitchen table with a cold mug, I finally audited the one set of books I'd never opened. Mine. 6 years of red-circled firsts. And what had I actually bought? Not their solvency? That was real. I don't regret $1 of the roof, or the furnace, or the pills. No. The other purchase. The quiet one. As long as the money went out, I never had to learn whether they'd keep me around for free. Every transfer was a receipt that said needed, and I had been collecting them since I was 28. Because needed was a word I could earn, and loved was a coin toss I'd been too scared to call in the air. My mother kept a lie going to stay off the charity list. I'd kept a fund going to stay off a list of my own. Same church, different pew. The realization didn't feel like lightning. It felt like finding an error you've carried across 6 years of statements. Sickening, then clean. There is a difference, I wrote on the back of an envelope, because I think better in ink, between being under a family and being in one. I'd been under mine so long I'd called the weight belonging. In the morning, I pressed my one good blazer, and while the iron heated, Danny called. His voice was strange. Heads up, Meg. Mom's been calling everybody since 7. She's telling them you're coming at 4, to apologize. 4 o'clock, Sunday, the 16th of August, and the kitchen on Cherry Hill Road was fuller than it had been since Grandma's funeral. Dad at the head of the table with his hands folded like church, Danny and Jess along the wall on folding chairs, Aunt Rhonda by the stove, having appointed herself percolator duty, and that old pot muttering and spitting like it knew things. My mother stood at the counter in her Sunday dress at 4 p.m. on a day she'd already been to church, which told me she'd dressed for this, and she had staged the room the way she stages everything. A chair left empty in the middle, facing everyone. The apology chair. There was coffee cake nobody would touch. On the wall by the phone, the calendar hung open to August, and the first had a red circle around it that had waited all month for money that never came. I stood a second at the storm door before I knocked. The same door where I'd taped the envelope with the key, the tape mark still faintly there, a little ghost rectangle in the corner of the glass. Whoever I had been the last time I touched that door, I wasn't anymore. Dad saw me first and stood halfway up, old manners fighting new shame. My mother didn't turn from the counter. "Come in, Megan," she said to the window. "Say what you came to say." The percolator spat. Rhonda pulled out the empty chair for me, helpful as ever, and I looked at it. Center of the room, facing the jury, built for a penitent. "Thanks, Rhonda," I said. "I'll stand." And I did not open with an apology. "I didn't bring paper," I said. "You don't forget numbers you've lived." And then, in the same voice I use to walk a client through a hard year, I said, the 6 years out loud. June of 2020, 3 months after Callahan's closed, a red envelope from the county in the junk drawer. $4,910 past due on this house. The pension buyout that came to cents on the dollar. A checking account I opened that summer, and $2,400 that left it on the first of every month for 72 months, time to land under the home equity payment, the electric, and the insurance, before any of them hit ground. The furnace in 22. $6,100, Danny, that was never a warranty. Half the roof. $4,800. Mom's prescriptions, on autopay, always full. All of it a little over $180,000, and I said that number slowly, not for drama, but because a number that size deserves the same respect as a name. Nobody moved. Jess had both hands over her mouth. Rhonda sat down without checking for the chair. And then I turned to my father, because this part was the whole reason I'd come, and I said the sentence I'd been drafting for 6 years. Dad didn't fail anybody. The dealership closed. That's arithmetic, not sin, and it was never a secret worth what it's cost this family to keep. My father looked at the table, and his shoulders came down an inch, like a man setting down a box. Danny was staring at nothing, lips moving. I watched him find the $25,000 in the ruins and understand whose it would have been. The percolator had gone quiet. In the silence, my mother turned around from the counter at last, dish towel still perfectly folded over her wrist, and smiled at the room the way she smiles at a stain. "Are you finished?" she said. "Because I'd like to say something about your sister's condition," my mother went on, calm as a hymn, to the room, over me. "You've all seen it. She isolates herself above that little office. She controlled your father's accounts for years. Poor Frank couldn't buy a coffee without her. And when we finally, lovingly, asked her to step back, look what she's done to us in 6 weeks. This is what money does to a person who—" "Stop, Carol." My father's voice was not loud. In 63 years, I don't think it has ever once been loud, which is why the whole kitchen turned as if the refrigerator had spoken. He was standing. His hand was flat on the table, on that spot he'd sworn on 6 years ago in the garage. "Every word she said is true," he said. "Every number, every date. It was my doing to hide it, and it was wrong, and I'm done." One sentence of confirmation. That's all he offered and all that was needed, and I want to be exact. He wasn't rescuing me. The truth was already standing in the room. He was just refusing to sit down next to the lie again. And my mother, my composed, hymn-voiced mother, who had run 4 decades on the fuel of being fine, came apart at the seam nobody knew was there. I will not be a charity case in my own church twice. It came out of her like something torn. Do you know what they do with families like that? They pray for you, out loud, with your name. Her hands were shaking on the folded towel. I wore a coat with another girl's name in the collar for 2 winters, and everyone smiled at me, and I would rather be dead than be that again. Do you hear me? I would rather— She caught herself. One ragged breath, in a kitchen so quiet the wall clock sounded like a hammer. Every face at that table had just seen the 13-year-old, and every face turned to me. I could have finished her. Understand that. She was down. The room was mine, and 34 years of swallowed words were lined up behind my teeth with their engines running. That's the moment revenge stories are supposed to live for. And standing in it, I found I didn't want it. Winning against my mother was just another way of staying in her game. I took the single sheet of paper from my blazer, not evidence, an offer, and laid it flat in the middle of the table, next to the untouched cake. "Here's what I can do, and the terms it comes with," I said. "I'll pay the county and the bank tomorrow morning and zero out what's overdue. About $3,700, all in. After that, $1,200 a month for 18 months. Not a dollar past the trapdoor. A number and an end date, written down. It goes on a sheet on this refrigerator where every person in this room can read it. Danny puts in what Danny can. Rhonda drives Mom to her appointments and picks up the prescriptions. And in exchange, 2 things. Mom and Dad sit down with Ms. Alvarez at the housing office. 1 meeting. And in the spring, this house goes on the market. because it's a bill with memories, and it is eating you alive. I looked at my mother then, and I made it as gentle as an ultimatum can be. Everything in daylight, Mom, or nothing at all. Those are mine. She stared at me across her kitchen. 6 years ago, I made a decision in the dark, I said. Tonight, I'm honoring mine. I was under this family for 6 years. I'd like to be in it. For a long moment, I genuinely didn't know which way the coin was landing. Then my mother set the dish towel on the counter, squared it edge to edge the way she has her whole life, and walked out of her own kitchen, through her own storm door, into her own backyard. The screen clapped shut behind her. Nobody breathed. And my father reached into his shirt pocket, behind the folded list I'd given him, and took out his pen. He didn't sign it right away. He read it out loud first. My father, who had hidden every number for 6 years, sat at the head of his table and read each line to his family in a steady voice, the overdue figure, the monthly amount, the end date, the meeting, the spring. Making himself say it, making them hear it. It was the bravest bookkeeping I have ever witnessed. Then he signed and slid the sheet to Danny, and my brother, who had walked in still owed a dream, wrote $200 a month in the margin, initialed it, and said, "Forget the 25, obviously," in the voice of a man paying for a stranger's toe out of plain decency. Rhonda signed up for Tuesdays and the pharmacy and cried on the coffee cake. "This is best," Dad said, tapping the page once, "the kind you can say out loud." Through the window over the sink, I could see my mother in the backyard, still in her Sunday dress, deadheading the roses with her bare fingers, back perfectly straight, back to the house. I went out. The evening was going gold at the edges and the screen door announced me, and she didn't turn. "You've made me small," she said to the roses, in front of everyone. "No, Mom, the lie was small. You've been carrying it a lot longer than I carried the money. I only had 6 years. You've had it since you were 13. Her shears hand stilled on a stem. She didn't turn around. I'd known she wouldn't. You don't undo a woman like Carol Thompson in a backyard. But after a while, in a voice I'd never heard her use, flat and bare, like a person setting down a purse at the end of a long day, my mother asked the only question she had left. "What happens on the first of the month now?" "Breakfast," I said. "If you want it." The roses moved a little in the breeze. "Your father likes the diner on Route 60, she said, to the garden. From my mother, that was not surrender, but it was an address. The house on Cherry Hill Road sold the following May to a young family with a swing set in a rented trailer before the ink dried. $212,000. The home equity line was paid off at the closing table, and what was left, after everything, was $150,000 of breathing room and a 2-bedroom patio home 4 blocks from First Baptist, where the yard is the size of a dining table, and my father has declared war on its one hedge. My mother told the church they had downsized to simplify. The whole congregation knows. The whole congregation nods. Mrs. Pruitt still brings scalloped potatoes, but they're friendship potatoes now, not pity potatoes. And if you think a town can't tell the difference, you've never lived in one. The sheet is on the new refrigerator. 3 signatures. 4 now that Rhonda added herself a column. Everything in daylight where a lie would have nowhere to sit. By month 9, there was a first of the month where Dad covered his own gap, and my line said 900 instead of 12, and he circled that one on the calendar himself. Black pen, not red. First Saturday of every month, we have breakfast at the diner on Route 60, and my father pays for the coffee with cash he counts out of a worn envelope, and I let him, because letting him is the whole point. Mom came for the first time in June. She sat on the edge of the booth like it was my couch, ordered tea, corrected nobody's posture, and when Sue called her hon, something in her face almost allowed it. We don't talk about the meeting. We likely never will. Some accounts stay open. But in March, I bought the little brick house on Putnam Street, the porch, the tired sign, my own name on a deed at 35. And when Dad came to see it, he handed me a key to the patio home, newly cut, still bright from the machine. Nobody asked him to. It lives in my kitchen drawer, and this time it's not a duty. It's an invitation. And I know the difference now. Because for 6 years I paid dearly not to. As for the family fund, the real one and the story both, it's closed. What my family found, one piece at a time, was everything else I had. Everything else I had been carrying, and everything else I had in me once I set it down. On the 1st of the month, my phone doesn't ring. Most mornings I drink my coffee on my own porch and let the quiet balance itself, which, if you keep books long enough, you learn is the rarest entry there is. If a family only stands when you're standing under it, that was never a home. It was a weight. Real family is the thing you get to stand inside, on your emptiest day, with both hands free. That's my story. One group message, 1 thumbs up, 89 missed calls, and a key I finally gave back, so a better one could find me. If you're the one quietly holding your family up in the dark, I hope you heard this. Daylight is allowed. Share your story in the comments, because somebody down there needs to read it, and subscribe to Calm Drama Stories. There's a new story like mine every week.